Thank you, Erica. So, I mean, I live for origin stories. I live for stories. They just fill me all the time. I can't get, I could just consume all of these entrepreneurs and their stories all day long. Um, so I really, really appreciate you all putting this together and showing up and sharing it. And I really believe, you know, there's lots of times we can share PowerPoints and information. However, it really is how you make people feel that they're going to take away. So my hope is that we've had some incredible stories and that they've moved people in some fashion today. And so, and I'm sure they have. They always do. And the incredible Artemis member businesses, you're really astonishing all the time to how you started, where you're taking your businesses and how you're growing them, and then how you're interconnecting. And so one of the things that Erica gave me time for today was just to talk a little bit about in terms of Artemis growth, because we are at a really interesting point whereby we have a very incredible solid base of member businesses, but what we're seeing, not but, and what we're seeing is this opportunity to do interrelated, interconnectedness work, more of it.
Oh,
And so often
yes.
that's talked about as being collaboration. Collaboration, we hear that C word so much, create, like, yes, collaborate, but really coming together, identifying a need from one of our mining sponsors, coming together and bringing a more holistic solution. And what I mean by that, so one area we're just really, really keen on making tangible differences, and certainly in the short term, and then building that for the long term, but is around women in mining. And we've heard today lots of stats, we've heard stories, we've heard programs, all kinds of initiatives taking place. However, the numbers, as our engineers are always good to remind us, the numbers still show that women's participation in mining it's almost stagnant.
Mm.
And in fact, we're hearing things and women on the board. So considering that lots of initiatives are we know that they're being implemented. We know that there being actions being taken and amazing work. And we're just thinking always, how do we kind of accelerate that, move that needle? And one of the things we see is you've just heard from 5 incredible women-owned businesses this morning. They're very that it's difficult for mining companies to be able to be always visible with what's going on in their entrepreneurial community. It's difficult with all of the fires, demands, et cetera, reports, everything that they have on their plates. And so Artemis really is this really special place that's able to pull together that entrepreneurial talent in areas and redirect it to more holistic solutions. And what is incredible, as I'm sure everybody has seen here this morning and listened to, is all of you Artemis member businesses are practitioners. You're coming from a place of not only education, experience, expertise, it's lived experience. You have done this. You've been boots on the ground all over, meeting, understanding, equipping mining companies in all your respective areas. So you really have that practical um, perspective and that practical knowledge that's weaved into your solution. So one of the areas where I feel that Artemis can make a significant difference in helping accelerate women in mining. And what I mean by that, it's not just about recruitment, it's not just about retention, it's not just about supporting young girls in the community. It's all of
Mhm.
this put together. And it's like I often say to Erica when we're talking about things, we know advertising works, we just don't know what part works. So I feel there's an incredible opportunity to bring together the talent within Artemis in a holistic way to be able to come to our mining companies and say, we know it's fragmented. It's really fragmented. Everything starts when new things start, they're always fragmented. But then
Yeah.
someone gets to pull their arms around them, bring them together and say, we've got a solution we think can help speed things up. So that's what we're working. One of the things we're working on in Artemis is because we've seen the difference from all of your work and what you do and the impacts you make. And now we're challenging ourselves. How do we come together in an interconnected, deeper, more precise way to really impact some of the big themes that we care about? and certainly one in Artemis for me personally, has always been women, and is always and will always be the independence, women's independence, and a piece of that comes with economic independence, career independence, and equal opportunity for that independence. So I'm really excited about pulling some of this talent together and bringing that, being the advocate and leading that more holistic solution into the mining organizations. And I think it's really something that they would love to have, and it would really, really do push the results up and
Well,
advance
speaking
them.
of the spirit of entrepreneurship, Heather, I want to thank you for modeling that so beautifully in the way that you're describing how in the early stages of any big change, you know, any maybe a system shift or a culture change we're trying to make, it's really hard work, and it's not just one solution
Mm,
that's going to move the needle. We need to try and we need to experiment. And right now, you know, you just heard from some of our Artemis members in terms of their respective solutions and areas of focus that they have, and the bits of impact and, you know,
mhm.
the amounts of impact that they've made. And it has to start there, right? It has to start with a
Absolutely.
successful experiment first.
Always.
And then I just love what you're saying about the next stage. So what does that next stage look like? Can you give us an example?
I think the next stage, so we have been pretty successful at doing a couple collaborations within Artemis, and one that's really well, it's been in the works for over 3 years, so there's lots of substance behind it, and it is our Artemisa Mining Challenge program, where we pull together. You've heard from Catherine Jodar. We pull together several Artemis members, and what we do is we bring to Canada Chilean female mining engineers that are having difficulty finding work, especially the young graduates in Chile, still being a very male-dominated industry in Chile. Participation is 6 to 8% female. So often they have extreme difficulty finding work. And yet up here in Canada, we need more mining engineers and female mining engineers. So we put together a collaboration of Artemis member businesses to provide training, to provide everything that we need to bring them in country, and that the mining companies can hire them. And so far, we've done amazing. We started during COVID. We've got 7 already in country. We've got another 4 cohorts starting, and our aim is to be 24 by the end of 24. But just thinking, like 3 years ago, nothing like this existed. So again, the power of coming together, interconnectedness, bringing our pieces to the table, and then just wrapping our arms around them and having an advocate, having someone, a voice that leads that then to the mining companies. So that's one that's been really successful. So the next one we want to do is, again, we know the numbers. What are the numbers of female women working, participating in mining in Canada? 15%. That's not a
Mhm.
voice. No one has a voice when you're at 15%.
Yeah.
And what we want to do, and we're in Canada doing responsible mining. It's just, we need to do something that is different than what we're doing today, that can accelerate all of these excellent efforts that are going on to advance the opportunity for women in mining. And that's what I feel is really an opportunity for Artemis members to come together and practically go to market saying, here's the opportunities for women in mining. Here's what they really look like. Look at what each and every single one of you have done. Look at the women working in mining, which, lives are being changed, careers are being fulfilled. And it's really, I think it's really unknown about the opportunities for women in mining.
Mhm. And I feel like there's almost like a perception gap on both sides of the fence. Like maybe women don't know or don't think of mining as a place for them. And then the mining talent doesn't necessarily see women as a viable talent pool. Like it's sort of both sides of the fence, right? And what you're doing and what some of our members are doing as well is shedding some light and sort of opening that up and saying, you know what, to like take the Artemisa talent experiment that you've been running for the
Mm.
last few years. Like I bet you it never would have occurred to those mining leaders. Hey, let's find some women in Chile that are having a hard time getting jobs, but are very qualified and very deserving and very eager to work. And they belong in mining. There's nothing wrong with them as far as talent and credentials go or ability to work. It's just that they haven't been able to break into the industry. Let's give them a shot, and let's solve one of our problems, which is that it is getting really hard to find good people to fill those mining engineering positions. Like, I think you probably just blew a few people's minds and you proved the experiment, and now sort of building on it, I think is what seems to naturally come next.
Yeah, and a last thing I'll say is that I'm not from mining. I started the woman's, entrepreneurial establishment. I'm all about wanting to empower women entrepreneurs. However, that being said, I've focused in the last 4 or 5 years in mining, and I have found the industry nothing but, yeah, it took a little bit to get things going. Everything does, but once you get going, it is extremely receptive, extremely wanting, and not just to listen. It
Mhm.
want the industry's open to take action, and they're just looking for what can we really do. So we take some of Shannon's stuff, we take Susan's stuff, we take Becky's stuff, we take Catherine's stuff, we take Kimberly's stuff, and all of that, and Carrie's stuff, and then a whole bunch of other Artemis members. And what have we got? This incredible pool and rich resource talent mix that can come together, go to market, and we're going to change it. We really are going to move that 15%.
Well, that's terrific. It's a one-stop shop
Yeah.
for our mining
Yes.
our mining sponsors, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So more to
I'm
come. We'll
sort of
be
picturing.
announcing. Yeah, sorry.
No, no, go ahead.
More to come on that for sure. We're actually engaged in piloting, because that's how we generally as entrepreneurs start things. We call them pilots.
Mhm.
Let's do a pilot, because that's how
Yes.
it business starts. You do a pilot, you figure out, you learn, and say, hey, is this worth replicating? And so we are in the middle of a pilot right now, and so we expect to be coming out with this collective vision, probably fall timeframe.
Wonderful. Well,
Mhm.
I hope that the folks that are on the line or watching this replay are interested in learning about that experiment and process. The image that's coming to mind for me for some reason, Heather, is one of those Formula One race cars that drives into the pit and has all those people surround it, and they're changing the tires and they're changing the oil and they're squeegeeing the windshield, and they're doing it lightning speed. Each of them has their job and
Mm.
they're doing it so efficiently and so effectively, and then that car gets back on the road.
Ooh, you always have the best analogies. Of course,
That's
she's
kind
a.
of
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So we're the pit crew.
yes, the pit crew, the one-stop shop. If you want to do something about
Mhm.
this thing that lots of people are talking about, how do we solve our talent shortage? How do we improve representation of women and other
Mhm.
underrepresented folks? And how do we move mining into the future? I think that's another big part of this, right?
Well, perhaps I'm biased. I tend to think if we have more women in it, we'll have more creative ideas of how to best move mining into the future. And that's all about diversity of thought and bringing in as many great thinkers that we can, whatever
Yes, yes.
gender they are, whatever, whatever background.
I mean, great point. It's not just about representation, right? But it helps.
Mhm,
And there is
mhm,
some good data to back you up on that, that the more diverse, the makeup of a team is,
Oh,
the more effective their solutions will be. If, though, if and only if those people feel safe to speak up and
mm,
to bring their
mhm,
ideas forward. So, looping back to what we were talking about
mhm,
earlier with Susan and Shannon, and having that psychological safety and that positive work environment where ideas are welcome,
right
right? And we
on.
have that
Yeah.
opportunity for people to bring forward the different ideas that they have, right? Homogeneity of thought and ways
Mhm,
of doing things is actually very detrimental to
mm,
problem solving and innovation in the long run, but it's easier in the short term because everyone thinks the same and there's this frictionless surface, right? So I think this
mm,
is sort of the mindset shift that I think a lot of people that are on the call really understand this. I'm thinking the people that engage with Artemis do understand that the friction or the
Mhm,
disruption of new
mhm.
ideas and different ideas that could cause some conflict, right? It could upset things just a
Sure.
little bit in the short term, is so worth it in the long term. And bringing that diversity of thought and putting in the work to create those cultures of psychological safety where we can bring forward ideas and jam on them and make them the best they can be. That is what is going to help us move into the future.
1000% agree. Mhm.
Yes, yes. Okay, Heather, I want to ask you one more question and then we're going to open it up and
Okay.
have our speakers back for a panel. But sometimes I know this because I've worked with you and I've known you now for more than 5 years. And the idea of being agile is one of the
Mm,
key, it's a kind of a foundational skill or a principle of being an entrepreneur, right? And our businesses tend to be smaller. We are often the one in charge of making that decision. Do we pursue this type of work or that type of work? Do we brand ourselves this way or that way? Do we position an offer here or there? And that in itself is sometimes a little bit difficult because it means an abundance of choices and that can be complex. However, it also means that we can move with the market. We can listen to our clients. We can understand what it is that we're hearing. And sort of like you're doing with this pilot that you were describing, we can create solutions to meet those emerging needs. We can keep up with the pace of the evolving landscape of an industry like mining where it is very complex and it is rapidly
mhm.
changing. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to the importance of agility and why that's so important in entrepreneurship.
I think like, I just love that word. I love it for a life word. Life outside, just living with agility, since you're really living with uncertainty most days, and to a
Mm,
way to not combat that, but work within that, optimize that, is being agile. That
mm,
being said, what I see from the Artemis member businesses is most of you you're ahead of the thinking. And
mm,
most of you are bringing ideas that are disruptive because you're ahead of the curve. And that simply is, I think, a responsive. That's what entrepreneurs do. They identify these gaps that maybe no one else has identified it yet, and then they go out and start doing something about it. So I think the opportunity here is you are ahead. And so being ahead, what does that mean? And how do we thought lead, which is exactly what we're doing today, sharing ideas, and then how do we get some practical experience? And so all of that is in this cycle of agility, to
mm.
recognize what it is. And you most often you're bringing in practices from other industries that can benefit mining. So I think being agile is just, it's I don't even know how to say it. It's kind of in the DNA, and that's how you approach you being entrepreneur mindsets. And so when you can be entrepreneurs inside organizations,
Mm.
it just may be more difficult, called intrapreneurs. But certainly the entrepreneurs that are out, us entrepreneurs, like you said, Erica, we have the freedom to choose what we're working
Yes.
on, who we're working with, what we want to work on. And sometimes that can be overwhelming, but at the same time, we tend to, I believe, what I've seen time again,
Yeah.
is you are thinking ahead of the curve. And so your opportunity is to be agile because you're working with clients that aren't quite there yet,
Mm.
and you're going to help them steward getting there, but being very practical about the approaches that you take to get them there. So all of that in combination, I think, goes under the word agile, and you're all brilliant at it. And I
Oh, thank you for that. That is just so cool to hear. And I love the way you framed that around being ahead of the curve,
mhm.
right? And I know I think there's a sports analogy for this one too, around like go where the puck is going, right? Don't go where it was, because by the time you get there, it's gonna have moved. And I'm curious, just because I know you have so much experience working with entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in the mining industry in particular, is it ever a challenge or a detriment to be ahead of the curve? Like, is there ever some difficulty in that because people aren't there yet? You're bringing new
Hmm.
solutions. Maybe you're making people uncomfortable. Like, what do you see around that?
Well, I think initially you get a lot of resistance.
Mm,
Because and again, it's nothing it's not personal. It's simply that that's where the companies are, and you're ahead of that. So I just think as long as you recognize, like, yeah, you are ahead, that you will help everybody and lead them and steward that idea, that solution, what you're doing. It may just take a little more time in the beginning because you're not displacing something that anybody knows about. This is pure creative, juicy new stuff. And that second thing is people have a hesitancy. Oh, it's kind of risky. I don't know about those Artemis women. They could be risky. Well,
They look
so
like trouble.
and so that's another thing. And I know I got in the initial phases of Artemis as well. Who are these small businesses outside of the catering comment? And, well, are they going to be in business? They sound kind of risky and blah, blah, blah. So I
Oh,
think that's, middle of the road mindset, but your opportunities to find those innovative thinkers, they're always there. They're usually about 3.5% of the population. When you look at the product maturity curves that have been studied relentlessly for decades. So innovative minds are but that's okay. We all have a role to play. So I think that's in just recognize it can take some time when you're ahead of the curve. And you're trailblazing.
yes. That's such a
And
great tip. Go ahead,
mhm.
Heather.
Yeah, just saying that, but however, what you're doing, you're passionate, it's going to make a difference, and that eventually will turn into and that movement. So in Artemis, we've gone past our early adopter stage. Everybody has to get your early adopters, and then you go to your early majority stage in the market. So we're at that early majority. The market follows the same cycles all the time, and once you get past with your innovators, then it's a different you can accelerate. So I feel now we've about back to women in mining. There's so many initiatives going on, so much great work being done. However, there's an opportunity now to get to that early majority phase and go and accelerate it.
Hmm. So exciting. And I so appreciate, I can actually picture that bell curve
Curve, right?
that you're
Yeah.
talking about, right? Where you have those early adopters.
Mhm.
And at the beginning, the party's not very big, right? You
Mm.
have to kind of utilize the opportunities that you have, and there might not be that many people who understand what you're doing or are willing to give you the shot. But for the ones that you have, you really make the best of it. And over time, people come along. Others start to see,
Mhm,
oh, look what's
mhm,
going on over there.
mhm.
I want to be part of that. And gradually, little by little, it grows.
Yeah, I remember the first getting a first sponsor with Artemis. I love all those days to go back and think about them and go, oh, wow, I'm so glad we just hung in there for a while. But even the first sponsor said, I will sponsor you as long as you get two more to sponsor you.
Oh, that's interesting. So you had to get
Hmm.
two more first, and then that person would say
Hmm.
yes.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I'm guessing you did.
Of course I did. Yeah. That's why we're here today. But it's just interesting, right? So again, if I had a product that was displacing something that was known, da da da, and it's a whole different ball game than going in and selling something that is totally innovative. And that's what all of you are presenting, and all of you have started your business on innovation, and that's what you're selling is change.
Yes. Oh
Hmm.
my gosh. Heather, I could talk to you all day about
Yes,
this stuff.
yes. Over to the
So
panel,
much fun.
please.
It's so cool. So yeah, I'm just underlining the word risk here because that's what's coming to mind. But